a self-help love story. And for those of you who watch the show, typically I'll go over past guests' books, but I've kind of changed the format a little bit. I want to talk about who's coming up. Christina Montoya wrote this book. This is her second book, If I Never See You Again. She's going to be my next guest. Christina is a member of CALMA, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors, and we spoke yesterday, and I've started reading the book, and I think it's going to be a really good read. So we'll be talking about that next week. So if you like love stories, I think this is going to be a really good read for you. As always, I always try to make a shout out to CALMA. I appreciate CALMA very much, the Colorado Alliance for Latino Mentors and Authors. I am so proud to be a part of them because they've made an impact on me and on people in the community. And so, CALMA, thank you very much for all you do for the community. Today, guys, I'm so honored. I have a guest that is someone that I've been a fan of for more than 30 years. Someone who who's mentored me. With some really, really good wisdom and information in my lifetime, and someone who I just respect so much. And Polly Baca, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, good morning, Paul. It's great to be here.
Wonderful. Polly, we weren't sure what we were going to talk about, and I know that you're very well versed in many topics, and one of the things that I feel very strongly about is women's rights, women's equality, and that's just been a really important topic for me. Because I know about what's going on in society. I know what's going on in the workplace. I know that there's inequality. I know that there's a lot of wrong being done, and it's not new.
No, as a matter of fact, it's fascinating to me that, I got very involved in the women's movement in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. I met all of the leaders at that time and felt so passionately about the importance of women being involved in all parts of our society. And it's exciting because we have made some progress. We have more to go, but we've made some really fascinating progress. And I was thinking about this before I came. And on the Denver City Council, for the first time, we actually have 9 out of 13 women on the Denver City Council. It was cute when I went to the Mayor Mike Johnston's inauguration and the inauguration for the new council members. And Jamie Torres, who's the president of the council, she joked with the mayor by saying, we've got 9 women on the city council now, and we can override a veto, which I thought was beautiful. Out of those 9 women, 6 are Latinas.
Whoa, man, that is really
incredible. I mean, I remember the day back when Ramona Martinez ran as the first Hispanic woman to be elected to City Council.
Wow.
And then Debbie Ortega followed her shortly thereafter. That was, I believe, in 1980, 87, 80, mm-hmm. 86, the late 80s, mm-hmm. that they were both elected and started this amazing progress. There are still areas where women are definitely being discriminated against, but I think it's exciting that we've made progress.
That is good news. Gosh, I didn't know that. That is really incredible to hear. It was funny because when I went online and I was trying to find statistics for women, and Latina women in particular, it was like the top article was from 2013.
Oh, my
And it's
gosh.
like, is nobody doing research? As I delved through it, I found more and more, relevant information, but it was really surprising that there's not more studies being done, that there's not more attention being paid to, because the Latinos as a group are very fast growing and very powerful.
Yes.
Not only is our economic power increasing, but our political power. We're becoming more educated, and as that happens, we're going to start seeing transitions.
And we have made progress again. We have more, and what, I'm going to have to write down some of these statistics because we have more women, more Latinos in the Colorado State Legislature than ever before in the history of Colorado.
Wow.
When I served, we thought, wow, we grew to 9 members of the legislature. And now I think the last count was 14, and it might be more than that. Mm-hmm. And we've got 2 Latinos now running for, well, we had the Senate majority leader was a Latino, Dominic Moreno, who just accepted a position with Mayor Johnston as the deputy mayor. And but we've got 2 Latinos lining up to take his place.
Wow.
Along, and 2 women. One woman. Well, it's really Robert Rodriguez is a candidate. Josie Gonzalez. I mean Julie Gonzalez and Faye Heath, the 2 women. One of whom is Hispanic. So it's going to be interesting what happens in the state senate.
Oh man, that's good news. That's
Yeah.
really good news. Going back, you were a groundbreaker when you got into politics. I mean, there were no Latina women at all.
There weren't any women.
There were no women, period, yes.
Well, actually, in the state house when I first ran, there were 5 women. And the year that I ran in '74, we expanded it to 11 women out of 65. And I was the first. Well, actually, Benny Benavides had run for the state house and had been elected. But then I was the first 4 years later, I ran for the state senate and was the first woman of color to serve in the Colorado State Senate. And the 3rd in the country to be a state senator.
Man, so you really broke some barriers.
And that was a long time ago, and that was 1978. So it's been it's been a lot of progress since then, and I'm so proud of the women who have really stepped up to the challenge and they're doing great things. They're sponsoring really good legislation. Back in my day, we had just passed well, I carried the pay equity bill that quite frankly we couldn't get passed. It wasn't passed till a couple of years ago when I was invited to the signing of with the governor, Governor Polis. So a lot of stuff that I started is finally getting done.
Wow. It's a slow process, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But as long as we're moving forward, it'll stick.
Yes.
That's the important thing. It'll stick. When I got in, we had just passed. Well, the Supreme Court had just declared Roe versus Wade as the law of the land, and my friend Sarah Weddington was the attorney on that, and I knew her. I got to know her later because we both served in a state senate. She was a state senator from Texas, and so in those days there weren't that many women. So the Center for Women in Politics was formed, and they would bring us together, every year to meet each other. So I met all these amazing women from across the country, and it was a time where we were all just really trying hard to assure that other women could come in after us, that they would be elected after we were. And for me, Laura De Herrera was elected to the state house 2 years after I was. But it took quite a while for any other woman to be elected to the state senate. Once I got there, another Latina was not elected until Sandoval, Senator Sandoval, Paula Sandoval, was elected in I think 2000.
Man, so
it took a while. It took almost a quarter of a century.
Now, when you started in politics, did you find a lot of
pushback?
A lot of pushback, yeah. I'm trying to find a diplomatic way to say that.
Downright discrimination.
Yeah, that's the word I was kind of thinking of.
Oh yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, a lot of things were happening in those years. When I first ran for the state house, there had never been a woman elected from Adams County to the state house, let alone a woman of color.
Man.
And there were people. We actually the person who had that seat had withdrawn as a nominee, Stan Bender. He withdrew because he had been appointed as city manager of North Glen, where we're at now, and the district was in Thornton, so he had to withdraw as the candidate. So they had to select a new candidate, and 3 white men and had this. Well, actually, what happened was because I wasn't thinking about this at all. I had just been active as a supporter in Thornton to help other candidates, and I got a call from a reporter from the Sentinel newspaper, and he said, Polly, I was just talking to Shirley Whitten, who is the vice chair of the Adams County Democratic Party, and asked her who she thought might run for this vacant nomination. And she mentioned the 3 men, And then she said that you might consider running. So are you going to run? Out of my mouth came, yes. Hung up the phone and I said, what the world did I just do? No plans to run, nothing. But I had been very active and I knew how to run. I had worked for Bobby Kennedy already in his national campaign, and I'd worked at the White House. I'd done enough that I knew what to do with campaigns,
Wow.
you know, and how to run them. So I just talked to all the precincts. I won that nomination by only one vote.
Man.
But it happened, and that started this whole process.
One vote.
Yeah.
You know, and people talk about how their votes don't count, and I mean, this is so crucial. You know, I mean, I'm always talking about getting to the polls, getting to the polls. It's so
Yes.
critical. And that one person, if they hadn't gone to the polls, you might be.
Well, this was a vacancy, so it was the 50 committee people that had the right to vote.
Oh, I see.
So it was a little bit different. For the general election, when I ran against a Republican, I actually got 69% of the vote. But to get the nomination, you can't run for the general election without the nomination.
You must have that nomination.
I had to, and the primary had already passed, so that was why you have your precinct committee people voting to replace, you know, to get a candidate to run against the Republicans. And literally, I won that nomination by only one vote. The irony is, we had, at that time, you had precinct committee people, women and men, and one of my strong supporters was a woman who lived in the mobile homes, Judy Colley, and she said, you know, she had gone to her precinct committee colleague, Bill Kennedy, and said, Bill, we have to vote for whomever would help us in mobile homes. That's got to be our key, whichever the candidates would be willing to help us. And I had already gotten involved in some of the mobile home issues when they were having fly-by-night operators coming in and selling them mobile homes that would then fall apart, you know, just a really...
Wow.
So I decided that if I got elected, I would develop a mobile home licensing board so you could, to do away with those fly-by-night operators. So that night, there were two white men and me because one of the three had dropped out, the three of us, and I was the only one that had a solution. So Judy was sitting right next to Bill Kennedy, and she said to Bill, remember, Bill, our agreement. And she watched him as he marked an X by my name.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Actually, when I had gone to see him, because I was trying to see all the candidates, when I went to see Bill at his mobile home, as I walked in the door, he said, are you one of those Corky Gonzalez Laras Unida people? And I laughed and I said, you know, well, Corky's a good friend of mine, but I've always been a Democrat. I'm not La Raza Unida. So we had a good talk, but he still wasn't sure about it, and it was Judy that got him. But then he became a big supporter of mine. You know, I was really pleased that a lot of the folks that didn't support me ended up supporting me later.
And it's just really just seeing what you're really made of, what your real issues are, and how you stand on things.
And willing to listen to the folks. Elected officials need to be willing to listen, and then take up the cause for, especially at your local levels. The local issues are far different from your national issues.
Absolutely.
You know, like mobile home in licensing was a lot different than at the you know, it was a local issue.
The local level, yes.
You know, and pay equity. You know, when I sponsored pay equity, now that was a national issue. That we had difficulty passing. That was so women would be treated equally, you know, as men. And there are other issues like that. So you know, you have to figure out which part of the government can solve the problems you're concerned about.
So working in the government takes a lot of know-how. It takes a lot of knowing who to talk to and when to talk to them.
And they're easy to talk to. I encourage people, you have a problem, call your legislator. Call your city council person. Somebody at my building was concerned. I would buy their, what happened to me was that a pipe broke, and I live in a high-rise, the Wednesday, and a pipe broke and flooded my unit. So I had to move out, and I'm living now at the Residence Inn until they fix my unit. By the way, I want to say, I told Mario and Anton that I was coming on today, and they are part of the crew that helps. They're wonderful breakfast hosts. You know, they help. I get free breakfast every morning.
Oh, cool.
And they make that happen. So I wanted to say hi to them. But when I, moved out of the Windsor, I realized, there are a lot of issues that we need to be concerned about locally.
Yes, there are.
That impact all of us.
Mm-hmm. I can't help but think about so many politicians are running, and they're running to serve a small constituency. They really don't see that their position is to serve the whole, the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a real shortfall there because there's so many people. I mean, typically when you have a politician who's serving a small group, they tend to come from a specific political party, and they don't really see the big picture, I guess. And so,
Well,
valuing diversity.
That's up to us.
It is.
To call them and be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I encourage people to do. If there's an issue, call any of your elected officials.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't do it, they can tell you where to go.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not in their area, it could be, you might have to call Senator Bennett or Senator Hickenlooper or out here. Does Yara Caraveo represent this area?
I don't know.
In Congress?
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah, I think she might. She's the first Latina from Colorado to serve in the United States Congress. And she's really a wonderful, wonderful woman.
Wow.
That we need to be very supportive of. Because it's a very marginal district, because she represents the areas of Adams County and Weld County. And she goes really far north to Weld County. And we need to help her,
Mm-hmm.
and we help her by making her aware of the issues we're concerned about, and then voting. Everybody listening to this broadcast if they're not registered, just go to your city, your county clerk's office or your city clerk's office and register to vote.
Yes, thank you. There's so much voter suppression going on. There's so many legislative bills being passed, not so much in Colorado, but nationwide. There's legislative bills that are opposed to voting, to voting rights, and so it's so critical that we get out in masses. And I don't care what party you are affiliated with, we need to get out and vote.
Our democracy depends upon that. It depends on every single one of us participating and voting.
Yes.
And it's not hard. And all you have to do is register to vote and then listen to the candidates.
Yes.
Go to some of their events, ask them questions and figure out who it is you want to vote for, and then do it.
I get calls from Diana DeGette on a regular basis,
Yeah.
and she has town hall meetings, and we try to listen when we can. I don't listen to all of them, but I really appreciate that they're really reaching out more, and they're telling me, hey, I'm gonna be on next Wednesday. Set your clock, and so it's really important because the issues are key.
Yes.
And with so much changes in legislation taking place, I think that it's even more important now that we get involvement.
And Paul, we're at a critical point in our history. As an American, as the United States of America, our democracy has never been challenged the way it's being challenged today. And it is so critical that people become aware and watch what's going on. We have someone who wants to be a dictator.
Absolutely.
And
has made it clear.
Yes, and he wants to do away with our democracy, and he was president and wants to run for president again. And you have to check people out, because there are some people when I was in office, I really did trust my colleagues, because if you lied, it would destroy your reputation. And it seems to me that now there's much more misinformation out there than there was when I was in office. And it's more at the national level. You have to question and read and listen. What I tell folks, don't just listen to one news station. Listen to all of them. Listen to all the different radio and TV stations or news stations, and get a handle on what they're saying, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Truly.
You know why? Back in the 1990s, we had the Fairness Doctrine.
Yes.
And remember, we used to
Ronald
be called
Reagan actually.
Yeah, Reagan. President Reagan decided that he didn't want the Fairness Doctrine, and the Congress had it was supposed to be it it had to be reauthorized every so many years, and Congress decided not to reauthorize it because Reagan didn't want it.
And that just opened up a Pandora's box.
It sure did. Because what the Fairness Doctrine said was that you and I talking on the news or on the radio, if we said something, you had to represent both sides. You know, if you had somebody talking on one side, you have to have somebody come and talk from the other point of view. And that way people can get both points of view.
Two perspectives, absolutely. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And so after that, it was just your opinion or your news and nothing else. And so there was no opposing position or no way to criticize or to critique or to even understand fully the points that were being made.
Exactly. We really need to have the Fairness Doctrine back. But I think that's going to be very hard to do.
Yeah, I think that just the powers that be don't seem to have an interest in having the whole truth and nothing but the truth told.
That's right. That's right.
Sadly.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 90s, you operated a program over at UCD College.
Yeah.
And it was called Visiones.
Yeah.
And as participants, one of our assignments was we had to find all of our elected officials from the coroner to the president. And I've laxed on that, but man, I got to tell you that was such an experience for me because I didn't realize that the coroner was in my line of leadership.
Yes.
You know.
You know, in Adams County, you vote for coroner, and I think in Denver County, I don't think we do. You know, but we do vote for the county clerk and reporter. And
yes.
So, you know what was fascinating when I was offered the job of doing it was the Colorado Hispanic Institute, and it was supported by the colleges on the Auraria campus, and I had this leadership development program called Visiones, and I believed it was set up for Hispanics only, and I believed that it was important to expose Latinos and Hispanics to other ethnic groups. So I developed it into a multicultural group. But there was another value that I had, and that was that we all needed to know that our elected officials we are the folks that determine who they are.
Yes.
You know, we're the ones that can determine who represents us. But so many don't know their elected officials. So that's why for this leadership program, I made the participants.
And it changed me. I mean it. And I think I speak for many of the participants that it was an eye-opening experience, you know. Transformational leadership.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I think back about, you know, to that, and I heard the term on TV yesterday, and I was like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
But
we were ahead of the game.
I think so. I really do. As I look back and I think about the things that we learned and the experiences we had.
Now, did you have to interview one particular person you could vote for?
We did.
Yeah, that's what I thought was important too. That you interview somebody who you could vote for, and come back and report on that. Who did you interview?
Oh my goodness. At that time, oh my gosh, it's been so far back, I don't remember.
You know what I remember the most out of that class? I don't know whether or not, let's see, there was one of our participants who wanted to interview Tim Wirth because he was the United States Senator at the time. Most of our participants asked for, Jim Chavez was the one that wanted to interview Senator Wirth. Most of our participants interviewed, you know, like their city council person or their state legislator or, you know, the mayor, somebody, you know, at the more local level. But Jim came to me and he said, I want to interview Tim Wirth, our United States Senator. And I said, okay, so helped him make an appointment. You know, he called, I told him how to do it. And Tim gave him an interview, came in, and he sat down. And then Tim offered him a job.
Oh my goodness.
And it changed his whole life, career.
Oh, who was that?
Jim Chavez. I think that was the participant. Yeah.
That is so cool.
You know that. Yeah. You know, he then did not Chavez. Jim Garcia. I'm sorry. It was Jim Garcia that then ran with You know,
Man.
he went to work for Tim.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's an exciting. I mean, I've changed people's lives
Mm.
when they met their legislators or their elected officials.
Yes, it is because it does because first of all, you got to see that they're human beings. They're people just like us,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that, you know, back then I was quite a bit younger, of course, and you know, it made me want to be more of a participant, and not an observer. You know,
Yes.
it made me feel like I did have a voice, and that my voice did count. And you know, whether it's through influence, positive influence, or whether it's through, you know, setting an example, I have a responsibility. You
Yeah.
know,
And I just realized it was Jim Garcia, and I don't know if I said Jim Garcia.
yes, you did.
You did, okay, because I want to make sure that.
Is Jim Chavez, and then you said no, it was
Yeah,
Jim Garcia.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. Tim Garcia.
Okay.
You know, I don't know why my mind is, you know, it's got so many. At any rate, that's what you can do, is call one of your elected officials. You have a problem. They're elected to help us.
Absolutely.
They're elected to respond to our issues and concerns. So if I always encourage people, they still come to me with their problems. and if something that I can't handle, like last night, one of the women that was at when I went back to my condo to see how everything was going, she had some real issues with some of the regs that were going on, regulations, and I said, well, call your city councilman who was just elected. You know, call him and talk to him about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Why not?
Oh, because what has happened is that there was they put in new spaces for people to park, and in front of our building we used to have a loading zone and a space for the handicapped, and the city did away with that. So what you have to do, call your city councilman and talk to them about it. That was not good planning.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So many things that our elected officials can help us with.
Yes.
You know.
And are willing to.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and I think that I do a lot. I watch a lot of TikTok, and a lot of times they'll say, "Here's the number to your congressman," and I pick up that phone and I call them, especially when relevant issues are up, you know, ahead of me, you know. And I think that it's not only does it relieve your stress and, you know, calm your anxiety, but it also gives you some peace of mind knowing that, hey, you know what, you've done something. You've made that call, and you know, now it's in their hands, but at least you've made the effort, and you've done something.
Yeah, I think when you were at Visiones, you know, it was that challenge, you know, to call and to interview.
Yes.
And to come back and report it.
Yeah, it was because you know, very few of the participants were experienced in, you know, in politics, and you know, it was very new. It was very, you know, new ground, and so we were.
You don't know.
Yeah, we were afraid going through the unknown. You know?
Yeah, and there is a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
You think, oh, they're too important. No, they're. You are as important as any of your elected officials.
Absolutely.
And if they don't treat you the way you deserve to be treated, then don't vote for them.
Yep.
You know, but that's why it's important. Don't go to somebody else's elected official. Go to the person you can vote for, because that's what your strength is. And if we could get everybody registered to vote and know who their elected officials are, then we wouldn't have the problems we have today.
Yeah, we would not have this dumbed down society.
Exactly. Well, you know, I worry about, you know, the United States Congress. We're very fortunate that we have some really good representation in the U.S. Congress now, but there are members, particularly from the South, who aren't responsive at all to their constituents, and they're the ones that are trying to make it so that people can't make it harder for people to vote. In Colorado, we changed the way we vote back in about 2006. Jared Polis was actually really involved in that, you know, loosening up the way we can vote, so that more people, we can vote by mail. You know, we can vote up to the day of the election. You know, you can go in and vote. So you know, we've got the best, most accessible, in my opinion, voting operation in the whole country.
That's good to hear. That's good to know because, you know, you hear these horror stories. You know, it's illegal to give someone water or food or.
That's in the South.
Yeah.
I think that was in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I believe
but
so.
yeah, which was just anybody that tries to keep others from voting is is working against our democracy.
Yep.
Our
Yep.
democracy was based on, and our government that is dependent upon being first people educating themselves,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just through watching the TV news, different TV channels. Don't just watch one channel. Get the news by watching several different channels. Then you're more likely to get what the truth is.
The whole truth.
Yeah.
More of the,
Yeah. Right. And then after that, get engaged. If it's I always encourage people to actually select a candidate that they wanted to help, volunteer for, because then you gain a little bit of. All you have to do is walk precincts for them, or help them campaign, and then you have access, greater access.
Mm-hmm.
You have access anyhow, just because you're their constituent. But when you help the candidates, they appreciate that.
They reciprocate.
Yes.
They want to be helpful to you. They
Yes.
Want, yeah.
Yes.
And your cause is more relevant to them, I think. Yeah. That makes sense.
And I'm so excited because today, women and people of color are much more engaged than they were when I first started.
Oh, we are truly seeing a change. I
Yeah.
really am hearing more of a voice, especially in the female community, the Latina community.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful. I think it's something that it's an idea whose time has come.
Yes. Yes, it really is.
And I'm just so proud. Both of my daughters are doing very well, in the career,
Oh, that's
area.
great, yeah.
And both of them have way surpassed me. And so I'm like, yeah, go, man. And so when I hear about, females that are getting, 78 cents or 80 cents to the male's dollar, that just infuriates me.
Yeah.
And for the same work, and and I think about my daughters, and my youngest daughter was just promoted to like a colonel. She's
Wow.
a civilian, but a government job.
Uh-huh.
So E15 or something like that.
Wow.
And she's 35 years old.
GS15.
Yeah,
which is
GS15.
Really good.
And
That's
and
close
so
to the top.
she's a young lady, and and I can't take any credit for it because she's just such a smart kid, but.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It really is because I heard when I was growing up, we will surpass our parents financially, educationally, whatever. We're going to surpass them. And then they said your kids will not surpass you. When I came of age and I started having kids, your kids will not surpass you. They're going to be lower income, lower educated than you. And I was very frightened about that.
Yeah.
And I'm so at peace and relieved to hear that they.
Well, because we each have a responsibility to help the next generation.
Yes, we do.
And they're all, it has become tougher, than my generation. Although my generation was discriminated against,
Big time.
Yeah, I went to segregated, all throughout northern Colorado. The churches were segregated.
Wow.
We couldn't sit in the center aisles, or up front. We had to sit in the back or in the side aisles, and and that was painful.
How did that impact your faith, Polly?
Oh, well, first of all, I understood. My father always said, you don't change your faith because of a few bad male priests or ministers. You don't change your faith because of them. So I've never judged my faith on who the preacher is. I've always judged my faith on my relationship with the divine.
Good for you.
With God. And so I worked. That pain that I had as a child is what prompted me to get involved, and I just decided it was up to me. And throughout my life, what happened to me was because of that pain, I worked hard in school, and I got when I graduated, even though my principal tried to stop me from getting this scholarship. It was called the Joint Honor Scholarship, that was given to the top 10% of your graduating class, high school class. And I was in the top 10%, and my principal tried to keep me from getting it because she was embarrassed that a Mexican, qualified.
Oh man!
But she couldn't stop me, so I went. I got it anyhow. That was 1958. That was a long time ago.
Really?
Yeah, 1958. So I chose to go to Colorado State University, which totally changed my life. Because I had some professors that were really helpful to me. and one in particular, Lee Sefkin, who was the one that I was a physics major because I was good in the sciences, but I got active on campus. I ran and got elected secretary of my class, and I got involved in Young Democrats. Became the vice chair and International Relations Club. All these activities as a freshman.
Wow.
And so in the spring quarter, Dr. Sefkin I was walking with him as we were talking about, I think probably about the Young Democrats, and he said, Polly, what's your major? And I said, physics. And he said, well, how many organizations do you belong to that relate to your major? And I thought, not one. Not one. And he said, well, have you ever thought of changing your major? And I said, well, what would I change it to? And he said, well, political science. And I said, well, can I make money in political science? Because, that's what you go to college to make money.
Sure.
And he laughed and he said, well, I do. He was a political science professor. So, and then that as a sophomore, I was given the opportunity at that time, there was a foundation that funded 3 Democrats statewide and 3 Republicans statewide to work for their state parties during the election, during the summertime. And I applied for the internship to do that. But at first my professors, Dr. Willerman and Dr. Lee Sefkin said that I was too young. It was usually for juniors and seniors. But I was, by this time, I was involved in putting on a national mock nominating convention. And I was kind of the chair of that. And it went so much better than the Republicans, their convention. So both my professors came to me and they said, you worked so hard and the convention was such a success. We invited people from a 4-state area in the high schools and colleges. And they all came to Colorado State University to participate in this mock convention. And he said, we're going to work to try to get you that internship.
Wow.
And so they did. And I ended up with one of the 3 Democrats statewide to work for the Democratic Party the year that John Kennedy was running for president of the United States.
Oh, man, you were in the midst of...
Yeah, I met all the Kennedys and this young man by the name of Carlos McCormick, who was the very first person nationally to try to organize the Latino population across state boundaries. Mexican Americans was what he was really focused on at the time. His Spanish Americans, Mexican, whatever we were calling ourselves at that time. And he's the one that helped me get my first job out of college back east to work for it. So it changed my life. And now I'm on the board of Colorado State University. But,
wow.
But I tell them all the time, the reason I'm volunteer to be on this board is because I want to help other kids. Because by coming here, and I love that university, it changed my life and opened up opportunities that I could have never had otherwise.
Wow.
So I'm very grateful.
And that professor, absolutely, his words were life-changing for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Man.
Lee Sefkin, as a matter of fact, he's passed away, but I see his son every now and then at the Democratic Party activities, and I say, I still owe it to your dad. Your dad was the one that changed my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a term that you mentioned earlier, Mexican.
Yes.
It's so odd that to people from Mexico, we're gringos.
Uh-huh.
To white people, Europeans, especially in Colorado, we're Mexicans. And so we're like a people without a country.
Let me tell you how that all evolved. I lived through it. I'm pretty old. Back in the 50s, 60s, we were trying to figure out a term that would unify us. And actually it was earlier than that, in the 1920s. They decided that Latin was the term. And so they used Latin and formed the LULAC, the Latin American, but the League of United Latin American Citizens. That was back in the 20s. In the 50s, they were trying to figure out what term to use, and then they decided, well, we'll use the term Latin, and because there were Spanish people that called them Spanish, people called them Mexicans. So then they used the term, and they organized the Latin American Research and Service Agency in 1964. Well, what happened to me was that growing up, you see, and I need to give you the history of it. Back when we became part of the United States, because our population, our ethnic group, was here. We came north from Mexico in 1598, and my own family traces back to 1600 with Cristobal Baca, who came north from Mexico and settled in Bernalillo County, and it was of course just part of Spain at the time, and Spain incorporated this whole territory, south of the Arkansas, and came up up to took in about 6 different states, part of Colorado, not all of Colorado. And then Mexico had a revolution, and they revolted against the Spanish,
colonizers.
Colonizers, and so that was in 1810. So we all became Mexican because we became part of Mexico,
right,
up this far north. We were part of Mexico
all the way to southern Colorado.
Yeah, right. And then in 1846, it was when Texas decided they wanted their own country, and then 1848, the United States invaded Mexico. And the end of that war ended up with the United States claiming half of Mexico.
Thanks to General Santa Anna.
That's right. That's right. All of that. That history. And so what happened to those families, like my family, that were up here this far north? Well, we were always, Spanish, and then we were Mexican, and so we became part of the United States. The territories of New Mexico, California, and Texas, at that time, all new parts of the United States, decided those territories, their territorial legislatures decided to pass an ordinance that said if your heritage was anything other than white, you didn't have the same rights. So they were, trying to get at the Native Americans and folks from south of the border who, had mixed blood, and they didn't want to give up any rights, and of course African Americans were among that group as well.
Sure.
And so what our ancestors did, because they weren't dumb, they said, oh, well, we're Spanish, we don't want to be denied our rights. So instead of calling them, in Spanish they say somos mexicanos, but in English we're Spanish, because they didn't want to lose their rights. And so that's why my family called themselves Spanish American, until I always tell the story that I grew up Spanish American, then I went back east, my first job, to work with the labor unions, and I got involved and met all these folks from Texas and California who were more recent arrivals in terms of their heritage, who called themselves Mexican American. They looked just like me, so I started calling myself Spanish Mexican. And then I went to work for the Johnson White House, the White House Interagency Committee on Mexican Americans, and I became fully Mexican American. And then after that job, I went to work for Bobby Kennedy, and helped develop, I was the National Deputy Director of Viva Kennedy. But then after his death, and I was with him when he was assassinated. I don't know if you knew that or not. Yeah, it was a tragic experience in my life. I wasn't that far from him, and I gave up on politics at that point in my life, and went to work, found what became the National Council of La Raza. So I became Raza. That's how I identified. I was Raza. And then around us, I remember this professor from California coming and talking to one of our conferences that we were holding in Tucson, Arizona at the time. And he said, there's this group of Indians in northwestern Mexico that are really discriminated against. They're, down at the bottom of the ladder, and they're the Yaqui Indians. And when they say Mexicano, they say Mexicano. And so the more established, higher class, so to speak, Mexicans discriminated against them and called them Chicanos in a very derogatory way. And so this speaker said, at this point in time, this is 1969, the black, or the Negroes were saying, we don't want to be called Negro, that was a slave term. So we're going to call ourselves, started, I think, at that point, calling themselves African American.
Afro-American.
Yeah, Afro-Americans.
Yeah.
And some call themselves black because black was a derogatory term. So they took that term and made it high. The Puerto Ricans in the island of Puerto Rico, that had once been called Botequeña, said, well, we'll go back to our original term, which was Botequeñas. So they started calling themselves Botequeñas. So this professor said, well, we ought to take a term that was discriminated against also and raise it to a level, a higher level. So we should say we're Chicano and identify with those that had been discriminated against.
Wow.
And raise it. So we all became Chicanos.
Wow.
And that was the Mexican. It was the other ethnic groups didn't adopt the term, but as Mexican Americans we did. And so I was very proud to be Chicana.
Wow, that's interesting.
Then I went to work for the Democratic National Committee, and my job was to organize and get our population, our ethnic group, to the convention. And we had more people attend that convention than had ever attended in 1972, so we had a caucus. Very first time you had a caucus of our ethnic group at any national political convention.
Really?
And I was in charge of it, because I was the staff person. So we were going to elect officers, but we also had to decide on the term to call ourselves because we differed, and so Mexican Americans, Dr. Dan Valdez, I don't know if you remember him or not.
I don't.
He had a magazine here in Colorado called La Luz.
Oh yeah, I remember La Luz.
And he had written an article that said, we ought to call ourselves Hispanic because that's inclusive of Central and South America and Spain. And so we should be inclusive of all of our different countries that comprise our ethnic group. So we need to call ourselves Hispanic. And so that's what the Mexican Americans said. We, as our group, we need to call ourselves Hispanic. Well, the Puerto Ricans and the Cubans were saying, no. We're from Central and South America, and that's Latin America, because it was called Latin America. We need to call ourselves Latinos. Well, the Mexican Americans had more delegates than the Puerto Ricans and Cubans and other Central and South Americans. So the term Hispanic won, because we took a vote.
Wow.
So from that point on, we were going to be Hispanic. Well, the Congress people that were there, like Bobby Garcia and Eddie Roybal and some of the others, part of our caucus said, well, we need to organize as members of Congress. There were only 4 or 5 members of Congress at the time. So they decided they would call themselves the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. So that term was used in a very proud way during the 70s. Problem, Ronald Reagan gets elected president in 1980, and he's using the term Hispanic. And he cuts taxes for the wealthy, and then started cutting all those programs we had worked so hard to develop in the 60s and 70s, like the Pell Grants, and the civil rights benefits and EEOC, all these wonderful programs
Mental health,
passed.
so many.
Mental health, exactly. All of our health anyhow. So we were angry, particularly the young people. And so as I'm running around the country, giving speeches at colleges and universities, I keep on hearing the young kids saying, "Don't call me Hispanic. I'm Latina, or I'm Chicana, or I'm depending upon where I was speaking." And so eventually the term Latino, we all kind of caved and said, yeah, I guess we better call ourselves, because we were so angry with Reagan. So we started calling ours Latina, evolved as the term. And so now today, there are a lot of the old timers like me say, well, I don't want to call myself Latinx. What does that mean? Well, it means that you are, you honor however people want to identify.
Respect it, yeah.
Respect the gender. So that's why it's Latinx. They replaced the O and the A with an X. And so now I call myself Latinx, but I'll bet anything, in the very near future, we will go back to that original term back in the 1950s that was Latin. And we will start calling ourselves Latin again.
That's fascinating.
That's how it all evolved. I'm putting that in my memos, by the way. I just happened to live through that history and happen to be very, very involved in all of that, and all of that discussion and all. So
that's fascinating. That's cool. I'm glad we talked about this.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know it. So I share that in most of my speeches anymore, to try to educate our population that it wasn't And by the way, I honestly believe that is every individual's right to identify any way that they want.
Absolutely.
All of those terms are legitimate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's whatever a person wants.
Thank you, Polly.
However they wanted to identify.
Mm-hmm.
I just identify with all of them, whichever one is popular.
I remember when I was coming of age and starting to become more and more, conscious of my identity, and my mom said, "Don't you ever call yourself a Chicano."
Oh,
And I
yeah.
said, "Mom, that's what I am. That's what I want. That's who I am. That's my blood. That's who my heart is." And it took a long time to explain to her why Chicano was not a derogatory term.
And
But
it had once been.
it
in
had been,
Mexico.
influenced by the powers that be that make you feel inferior or make you feel like Chicano to her was like dirty or thief.
Well, it was the same. Chicano in Mexico was the same as the N-word here. That's why. That's why your mom felt so strong about that.
Maybe so.
Yeah, because it was.
I mean, not maybe. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
Right.
because
And
it's a derogatory.
So,
and
yeah, so if we
Wow.
would never call African Americans or blacks, we don't even call them Negro anymore, and we would never use the N-word
Never,
ever.
never.
I've never even said the N-word. That's how, if you're from Mexico, you feel about Chicano, because it was equal to that in Mexico.
Wow.
But that's why I was part of that group that said, no, we have to lift that name and claim it as our own and
Yes,
lift it.
embrace it.
Embrace it.
Mhm.
And so it's no longer a negative term because we don't want to discriminate against that group of Native Americans or
No.
Indians that were being discriminated against.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I hire a lot of Venezuelan and Cuban
Yeah.
workers, and I go down to a corner in Denver, and they're there, and I bring them to my house, and they do work for me, and while they're working, I always pick their brains. I ask about their education, I ask about their their politics, and
Right.
and I ask about oppression, and I ask about asylum, and I really try to encourage these young men, just make sure that they get work permits, make sure that they're protecting themselves. Watch out for the people in the United States, because they can be very, very cruel.
Yeah.
And I also tell them, what, el piel, the skin is el mismo. Your skin is the same color.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you talk to, and I'm not saying you should exclude other groups, but when you talk to Latino people, whether they're from Puerto Rico or Cuba or Mexico or Honduras or wherever,
we're all the same ethnic group.
there's a unity there
Right.
that has to be remembered, not forgotten.
Right, exactly.
And
We've all, in every single case, every single one of our ethnic groups has gone through some really painful times in their history. Discrimination, suppression, exclusion. And we all have to a certain extent, we all have to honor our pain.
Yes.
And accept one another for whomever we are and however we were able to rise above the pain. It's important that we don't divide and talk negative about each other.
Right. That's so critical. It's so important. Polly, I had taken so many. I had done a bunch of research, and I did a bunch of notes. I just want to go over a couple of key points that I wanted to make sure to talk about, and we may not have time to elaborate, but this article I found from August 2023, the Center for American Progress, Hispanic Outlook on Education magazine. Oh, okay. So, I'm sorry, forgive me, I'm going through my notes, I wrote them very quickly. Latina women make up 28.9%, make $28,900 less than a white man.
Yeah.
If this continues at this trend, it will take 185 years for them to be equal to men.
That's right. That's why we have to, upset the apple cart.
We have to upset that cart.
Yeah.
Why? Because only 26% of Latina women have a degree compared to 51.4% of white females.
And that's the reason I worked so hard when I was young. And that's the reason when I was offered these jobs, like the job in D.C. I didn't want to go to D.C., but I couldn't find a job here in Colorado. I graduated with honors from Colorado State University. I was one of 10 people, seniors on campus that was honored as a pacemaker, meaning that's the highest honor you could get at that university. I couldn't find a job. because at that time I had a teaching degree. Denver had already hired all the Mexicans they were going to hire, you know, or Spanish as teachers,
Wow.
and so I was closed out. You know, it wasn't my qualifications or anything, as I just applied late after the quota was filled. So
Wow.
we've been through a lot as Latinos and as women, but and I forgot what else I was going to mention. Go ahead and share.
Now we didn't even get to talk about affirmative action in the Supreme
Yeah.
Court.
Oh, that it upsets me.
Listen to this. Before the pandemic, Latinas in college was going up. It was exponentially increasing. And then there was a 5.4% drop in Latinas in college.
Because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic.
They lost, all of our small businesses went out of business. I was going to share earlier when,
Please.
you know, when I first got started, I went ahead and took these jobs because I knew that nobody else had this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I graduated from CSU, out of 1,000 graduates, there were only 7 Latinos. You know, out of it. And I think I don't know if there were any other women in that group. I have to go back and check my you know, check to see if there were other women out of that 7. Maybe there were probably 2 or 3, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not, because we, you know, men outnumbered us on campus 7 to 1. You know, so we, you know, we didn't get that chance, and so I always felt when opportunities. I remember taking that job and literally crying myself to sleep for 3 months when I went to D.C. because I didn't think I would ever find people that understood me because it was so different back there.
Oh, man.
But I felt that I had that responsibility because I had gotten that opportunity. And that's what happened in my life, was that I knew that if I didn't take those risks, who else could? I mean, I was blessed with being able to get a college degree.
Yes.
And no other Latinas were able to do that at that time. Very few Hispanic males. There were just a handful of us. And so, you know, so you have to go forward and accept those opportunities, because another person like you isn't going to get that chance. You know, so I always tell the young people, take that risk. Just say yes.
Just say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just go for it.
Man, Paulie, we're all running out of time.
Oh my goodness.
There's so many things I would love to talk to you about. I mean, Paulie, you have broken barriers that very few people have been able to break. I mean, you were the head of the GAO. You ran the whole federal center, man.
Yeah, the General Services Administration.
GSA. I'm sorry.
GSA.
Not the
and that, yeah, that was an exciting. Yeah, that's when one of our buildings was attacked.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
so it was really a critical time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there had never been a woman or an Hispanic to be a regional director of GSA in this region, 6-state region.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was wonderful.
See what I mean about, if I didn't do that, they weren't going to appoint another Latino.
Never.
You know, so I had to take those risks, and I had to do when opportunities came, and I think that's true for all of us. When opportunity presents itself, grab hold and go for it.
That's right. When it knocks, you answer, man.
That's right. And even if you don't succeed, it's okay, because there'll be another opportunity.
Yeah.
But just go for it. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I have a slogan on my show. It's that everybody's looking for a hero.
Oh.
If you can't find one, be one.
I love that.
And Paula, you've taken it upon yourself to be that hero, you know, and you've influenced, I know, hundreds and hundreds of people that you don't even know. I'm one of them.
Oh.
And, you know, I've taken it upon myself since Visiones, which is in the 90s, to mentor people.
Oh, good.
I mentor young men and women. I've become a life coach because of what I've learned in Visiones, and my impact on the world is going to be lasting, you know, because
yes.
I'm the guy that walks into a place and someone says, "Hey, I remember you. You came and spoke in my high school," you know.
That's right.
And that little influence may have a huge, profound impact for years, generations to come.
It's amazing. We just don't know.
Yes.
That's why we have to keep doing it.
Yes, we have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And you know, talking to you, and knowing that you've been retired 15 years, I've only been retired, coming on 5, and I mean, it's like, man, I better get on the stick over here. But Paulie, I mean, it's been such a great honor to have you, and thank you so much for coming here and being with us today. I want to make sure and give you a copy of my book. I haven't signed it yet, but I want to make sure that I give that to you as a gift.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me to come, because this is an honor for me to be able to share You know,
Thank
and particularly in this, in this arena, you know, it's important that we keep sharing. So I want to
True.
thank you for having this radio program.
Yes,
and
Henry
continuing.
Archuleta, man.
Yeah, that's great. You know,
Yes.
well, we'll thank Henry too.
Yes.
You know, for continuing this effort and knowing that by just having this radio program, you're making a difference.
That's right. You know, that's my voices that I have here, and I wanna shout out that, you know, hey, we want to make the world a better place, and
That's right.
that's exactly why I'm here.
That's right.
Guys, you've been watching the Weekend Boost. This is KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. Join us in 2 weeks. We'll be having author Christina Montoya on her book, If I Never See You Again, sorry. And we'll be talking about her latest works. And guys, thank you again for joining us. We love you. See you next time.